we've heard a lot about mental health throughout the conclave, and I'm happy that it's now something that people are discussing. But if I were to ask you, which is the bigger crisis, the crisis of patients or the crisis of those who need to treat them? Because I think we're woefully short of trained psychologists, psychiatrists, caregivers. I mean, the spectrum is as wide as the illness.
Yeah, so if you look at the prevalence of mental disorders, for example, there are possibly other countries which actually have a higher prevalence. So it's not as if we are very, very different from the rest of the world. But simply being the populous country that we are, there is a huge number of persons out there who need treatment. In fact, if you look at the human resources, earlier we were possibly, about 450 graduates were graduating every year, about 15 years ago. Now it's about 1,300. And yet, when you look at the ratios of mental health care professionals to the population, it's abysmally low. So, I mean, even as we kind of progress, the problems, the magnitude of the problem, simply the number of people who need help is huge. And that's why there is this kind of dissonance between who needs treatment and what we call the treatment or the care gap and the mental health professionals. So we obviously need to look at other ways of dealing with this problem, including, for example, in undergraduate medical education, or indeed in any kind of health, whether it's nursing, medical, etc., that everybody needs to be sensitive to mental health issues just as they're sensitive to physical health issues. So that kind of an integration right from the start will make the entire group of doctors, nurses, etc., sensitive to identifying and handling mental health issues.
But there are a lot of experiments that have happened as well. Short-term sort of courses for caregivers. There are a lot of experiments that are happening. I think there's Dr. Vikram Patel, if I'm not mistaken, who's doing something in Goa. There are other people who are doing this. How effective is that in bridging that treatment gap?
Actually, what ma'am says, it's a very complicated situation. Like on ground, what we see, the way mental health services are to be organized in most places, what they say is that it's kind of a pyramidal shape. For every psychiatrist, there should be around 10 times more clinical psychologists than psychiatric social workers, community mental health professionals. Yeah. What I see is that even for the psychiatrist and psychologist, there is a dearth of those. Like there are still psychiatrists which are coming up, but below that, the resources are very less. And whoever is there is no immediate way to include them into the services. So a lot of psychologists, they have this push and pull. Either they have to go to a remote village and work for 10,000, 15,000 a month. And because the mental health resource crunch is so much world over, they can go to Canada, they can go to Switzerland, and they can earn thousands of dollars a month. Now, for a youngster, of course, the choices then becomes very clear. But for a country, what we see is that despite training a lot of people, at the end of the day, apart from big cities, when it comes to tier 2 cities or smaller places, developing services is very difficult, and it's only a few people who are really motivated. Like you said about Vikram Patel, he has got the NGOs that he is running.
Yes.
So those are small things, but a systematic involvement, I think those kind of, there are only few centers where the number of social workers are there who can support the patients at their home. Although the number of doctors are gradually increasing. So that's another reason why there is a scarcity despite we are producing quite a number of mental health professionals.
The other issue is, of course, the cost. It's very high cost, obviously, because there's a shortage, and I've seen the Mental Health Act. Not all of it is covered by insurance, and even if you want to get insurance, it's very, very difficult to access it. So, given the situation, how does someone who's crying out for help, and most probably in a big city, I don't even know what the situation must be in villages, where does he or she go?
Yeah, so as you're saying, out-of-pocket expenditure for any kind of chronic disorder is extremely high.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, is
I mean, there are psychiatrists, psychologists who
Yeah.
are charging 7,000, 10,000 for an hour.
Absolutely. It's impoverishing,
Yeah.
actually. So obviously you need to have services which are available to everybody. It's not just availability, but also affordability.
Yes.
You know, and you have to be able to access those services. So I think what we're looking at least in the recent few years, is this ability to kind of reach whole of population. And one such initiative that has occurred in the last 3 years, and possibly COVID drove that, is really the Telemanas initiative, where people anywhere in the country can actually call a number.
Right.
And there is a state cell. There are counselors who've been trained in more than 20 languages who can at least reach out and provide the first level of help, or indeed get people access to other kind of services, particularly in the public health sector, where we really need
Yeah.
a lot of these kind of interventions, which are available only exclusively to a few people
Right.
in the private sector in urban India. So I think the whole idea is to really do that and create perhaps a network of services. One is talking about the health and wellness centers, where obviously the focus needs to be also on looking after your mental health, which is as important as, treatment for a mental disorder. So I think looking after that, integrating physical and mental illnesses together, training people, will possibly help us to develop that kind of a network, and using technology, for example. So actually technology has become a great way of leveling this kind of inequality, because now we have something called the NIMHANS Digital Academy. We also have digital academies in CIP Ranchi, in Tezpur, and in many other places, where we are now able to train a whole host of professionals
Right.
to be able to provide care, so that finally everybody gets at least a basic level of mental health care, which is so important.
That's very interesting you say that. One of our speakers earlier said that one of the they had a mixer, an AI mixer, and they had the biggest attendance for a mental health mixer. And all the people who turned up said that the most frequent question they asked to AI was, how do I fix my stress, or whatever, something related to it. But I just wanted to add to what you were saying and ask a question related to it. During COVID, we found the Anganwadi workers were actually functioning as mental health caregivers, so apart from sort of doing work for the vaccine, they also actually functioned as listeners and caregivers. Why were we not able to leverage that?
This is
No,
your photo.
Because that is a huge army of women out there.
Kaveri, I think what you're raising is a very, very important issue. First of all, I think all of us need to know how to take care of ourselves, number one.
Yeah.
And secondly, we need to have somebody in our vicinity to reach out to.
Right.
And that's where community health
Yeah.
workers can be extremely important. Listening, I think all of us need
Sometimes you just want someone to
Yeah.
listen to your problems.
All you need is a good, compassionate
Yeah.
listener first. And then, of course, somebody who will give you the right kind of advice.
Yeah.
That's also very important.
Yeah.
And I think community healthcare workers become then a very important connect. And in several states, as you speak, community health workers have been involved.
Why
There
can
are
it not
trainings.
become a national service of caregivers?
Yeah,
it's something that's staring us in the face.
Correct. The problem is really the model, because they're already overburdened with so many different kinds of programs.
And they're so poorly paid.
Yes. So, I think looking at a kind of step care model where you have a large number of community level workers who provide the basic care, and then getting people to go up to the more specialized
Yeah.
kind of things is the way to go forward. Absolutely.
Right. So
And-
please suggest it.
Yes, it's already.
People will listen to you, not to us.
No, it's already happening.
Right.
It's already happening, but obviously to have it to scale
Yeah.
and to have a system which does that, it's already happening in the National Mental Health Program.
Yes.
In fact, if you see what is happening to the National Mental Health Program, it's a decentralized program
Yeah.
now, looking at the district level and then the sub-district and the community level. And certainly community health workers are being trained. But obviously for it to have that impact
Yeah.
will take a little time. And remember, it's not just the community health worker being there. It's also knowing where do you refer to and who will
Yeah,
then provide
exactly.
the next level of care that needs to be put into place. It's a long way to go, but I believe that change is occurring.
Right. We talked about technology, and I believe you've also, you've also worked on an app. Let's talk about how effective technology can be in a mental health crisis, especially.
Okay, you are asking the most difficult parts of the crisis area. Okay, in general, what ma'am is saying that in absence of manpower, technology is something that quickly fills the niche.
The
Gap. So the problem currently with all technology are twofold. One is that although it is supposed to democratize the services to everybody, what we are seeing on field is that it is becoming an elitist way of looking at things. So even at AIIMS during the COVID, what we did was we went for telemedicine. The Telemanas program is an amazing program that I must honestly say.
It's a government program?
It's a government program, yeah.
Program. But when we did the telepsychiatry at AIIMS, we were using the English medium, people will have to come and log in.
Right.
So all our patients, the Babas who were coming from, the far-flung places of India, they dropped out. And we could see youngsters, college students, well-educated people. So it's how you plan these services. Otherwise, it's very easy to nowadays create an app and say that, look, this is my app, and you use it.
Yeah.
So there has been a huge movement on, like you are saying, about crisis management. Who takes the responsibility when an app is doing the crisis management? Right. So US FDA and even us, we are like in discussion that app cannot be the only pathway. It has to be in one of the many strategies that you are throwing at the community. And some strategy will be good for some person, some strategy will not be good. So you cannot just say that I will do digital and I'll leave everything. Digital has to be added on top so that people who are capable now, they come to us through these crisis times where they can just have an app and the app or the AI just talks to them and then there is a doctor behind it. But at the same time, it should not come at a cost of the community work that we are trying to do. And together, as more and more Hindi, regional languages come, we feel that the penetration of AI is going to improve. What we are excited about AI is if we can join the bandwagon now, maybe 5 years down the line, we'll be in a position to say, look, this can have a real impact. So right now we are learning.
Kaveri, can I just add that, we're talking about apps. The Telemanas now has introduced an app on October 10th last year. So in fact, it's very important, I think, for all the young people in the audience to try it out. Because I think you need to know what's available, what works, what doesn't work. I think that's a kind of feed. First of all, it's about getting help from what's available. And secondly, also questioning what's available and saying, hey, this needs to be improved. We need to have better access simply, especially for young people. I think it's very, very important to have technology to enable them to get in touch and get some professional help.
So, Dr. Moti, India is also a place where all demographies have their individual problems. But if I were to ask you, which is the section of the population which is most at risk, you feel, and which needs most critical help? What have you found in your work?
Yeah, so I think globally there is enough research to say, for example, that poverty, lack of education, employment difficulties, these people with these kind of backgrounds are mostly at risk. So we already know that that's a soil which kind of produces the maximum risk. But then you also know that mental health issues pervade everybody, right from, young children to higher education. You've been talking in the morning about the higher education crisis. So I think it's something that doesn't spare anybody at the end of the day, but certainly there are vulnerable populations, particularly when there are natural calamities, when there are crises of various kinds, people are particularly when there is significant financial loss, when there are huge relationship problems.
Which is basically India currently.
Everybody. And at the same time, we also know that there are certain biological vulnerabilities to certain disorders. So educating ourselves about this also becomes very important to identify. The other thing, of course, is stigma, something that we haven't yet talked about. It's still so sad that people find it so find it so difficult to talk about an emotional difficulty or a depression or an anxiety. It's very easy to say, I have a headache. I've got chest pain, I've got to go to the doctor. But to say I'm feeling low, I need help, is something that people find very difficult. So I think the first thing that's already happening is to have more conversations like these
Right.
about mental health, mental illness, and how to get help.
But, let's also talk about the spectrum of illnesses. I mean, it can go from ADHD, and every day I read a new article that tells me ADHD is a fraud, ADHD is not a fraud, ADHD exists, doesn't exist. There's so much research happening world over on that. But that spectrum of mental health issues, which goes from ADHD to, feeling suicidal, addictions, there's so many aspects to it. Which is the most critical issue in India currently, according to you? Yeah, at AIMS, I think you have all
Same.
kinds of people who come to you.
What you were saying is, so
I'm not talking about demography, I'm talking in terms of the illnesses.
yes, of
Yeah.
the illnesses, even WHO has classified. So one easy way to look at is common and severe. The common mental illnesses, of course, which are common, they primarily include anxiety and
Right.
depression.
Right.
And then the severe, so these are at the rate, lifetime prevalence would be something around 10 to 14%. And substance use would be another like 15% to 20%, depending upon how you are defining that. So the problem is statistically it doesn't make sense, but 1 every 5 or 1 every 6% will have a lifetime of depression. That makes it very common.
Right.
Whereas
And addiction, 1 in every?
1 in every 4,
Right.
1 every 3.
Addiction is the
So-
bigger issue currently, right?
Yeah, so addiction, if you say tobacco or alcohol, which are
Or
the...
drugs.
No. So again, of tobacco, alcohol, these would be your common addictions. And they are at 1 in 3, 1 in 4. Whereas if you go into the others, they are again somewhat rare at around 1%, 2%, 3%.
Really? I would have thought much more.
So cannabis, for example, is 3% of the adult population. Opioid use is something that's growing.
Yes.
From an 0.8, it's gone much higher. So certainly, I mean, there is a lot of transition, particularly among young people.
Yeah.
Drug abuse is growing, and the age of initiation of drug use
Is
lowering.
lowering.
That is very worrying because,
Yeah.
younger people really don't understand. Perhaps they're not completely able to really discern the advantages, the temporary kind of expectancies and the longer term consequences. So that's a very, very important age where they're at greatest risk to develop addictions later in life and to suffer the consequences of the substances. In fact, people don't realize that very often, for example, earlier the HIV epidemic was one of the drivers was
course,
drug use.
drug
Now the
use.
hepatitis epidemic,
Yeah.
one of the drivers is drug use.
And they don't see the connection.
Yeah. And you were saying, I mean, and I think that's something to talk about because ADHD is very, very real.
Yes.
Young parents
Thank
who
you
have
for
children.
saying it, but
Yes.
parents who have children with
Yeah.
ADHD
They
suffer.
so much. The child itself, in class, they are discriminated
Yeah.
against. They find
And
it very
such a
difficult.
stigma is attached
Absolutely. And therefore, but sometimes, earlier we used to, language is a very
Yeah,
critical thing.
this is a naughty child,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
But
So every symptom of ADHD is not ADHD. Just because a child is overactive, one must not kind of
Yeah.
immediately jump to a diagnosis. But I think, just taking on from where he left off, that at every age, at every developmental spectrum, there are different kinds of problems. So for young children, for example, disorders of emotion, conduct, refusal to go to school, those might be important things. Intellectual difficulties, ADHD, what we call externalizing symptoms might be important.
I would just like to add one thing. Our human brain is not well suited for understanding statistics. Why am I saying that? You say that, the number of suicides that happen. The national census is 10 to 12 per 100,000. That's less than 1%. And the attempts that happen is around 10 to 20 times more. So when you listen to that, so we have heard about 30% for depression, 20%, 30% for substance use, 20% for depression, 1% for that. Now I'm talking about 1 in 100,000 or 10 in 100,000. So when you convert it to the number in India, so if I tap, every 2 tap, 1 suicide attempt is happening.
God.
And every 10 taps, 1 completed suicide is happening.
God.
So when you convert by absolute numbers, that 1%, that 30% is huge. This what I'm talking about. This is 40 per 100,000. That's the rate. This is so much. So now you can make it to depression and say what happens there.
Right.
So that's back to me.
And then, the adult population, the working population, depression, anxiety, many of the disorders, the severe mental disorders are also unfortunately disorders of young adulthood.
Yeah.
So it's a great, and then as the populations get older, you have other issues
You have
like dementia,
loneliness epidemic,
degenerative disorders.
Yeah, and just sheer loneliness sometimes.
Loneliness, in fact, loneliness is now called the new epidemic because
it is,
all over the
because you have
world.
so many, and as our population ages, people are living longer. They also don't
People are
have
moving
family.
away from
Yeah.
families, so I think it's a huge.
I mean,
issue.
it's like everything all at once. So I don't know how you doctors live with it. But by the way, who do you go to when you are when you feel low?
Each other.
I quote the Beatles.
Yes.
I get by with a little help from my friends and family, of course.
Right. And you, doctor, who do you go to?
Same. We have a crib session with our colleagues and friends. That's the only way. Other people are definitely getting lonely, and like if a doctor is working from 8 to 10, there
Yeah.
is not much scope of socialization.
And 8 in the morning to 10 in the night.
evening.
Please
Yes,
specify.
I'll be specific. So, like
I
by
think
the
that's why when the L&T chairman said that 90 hours week, I thought we anyway are working 90 hours a week. I mean, we work on weekends, we work every day. Why does he have to specify it? I don't know. Yeah. So sorry, to get back to what you're saying.
No, so essentially we have to create our micro groups, whoever is there with you is your family.
Right.
So in relation to both of that, about this loneliness thing, a lot of students come to AIIMS from all across India.
Yeah, that's right.
And when suicidal ideation happens in them, we do a resource mapping. Which hobby group? Like, do you play badminton? Then you will be having a friend there. Do you have a hobby group based on eating? So if you are from southern part, you will go to a place. If you are from Rajasthan, you will go to a place. So you find out all the micro resources there and you create a community. So when during the COVID times, the doctors were doing 36 hours of duty and then going back to the hostel and no social contact, suicidal ideation suddenly jumped.
Yeah.
And we started doing online such groups in our student wellness center. Professor Sharan runs that. So we did cooking, chess, and those things worked. People were communicating from their home in Zoom, and doctors were doing that, cooking for everybody and then just showing, this is what I've done, playing chess. So in a sense, because the society is becoming fragmented, all of us are moving to places, it's very necessary to create a micro community wherever you are. Your family is with the people who you are.
But what if you're the kind of person who only seeks out someone who's not exactly the best person to hang out with?
So that's-
like addicts seek out other addicts, right?
Correct. So that's really the problem. I mean, in addition, of course, to the immediate things that we have, the immediate connects that we have larger social connects.
Yeah.
And if you have the wrong connects, or, I wouldn't even call it right or wrong. If you have social connects, and in fact, there's a lot of research now on social networks. And what gets young people actually getting into drugs is sometimes the social networks that they kind of foster or maintain. And that can be a very, very driving force to get you on a positive kind of note, because positive social networks can do the right things for you.
Yeah.
But if you get into a network that isn't good for you and you don't have the capacity to critically think and get out of it, you can get enmeshed in. And it's not only the network. If you're the kind of person who's vulnerable, who's easily influenced, who can't make up your own mind, who's a little anxious, then it's very easy to get sucked into that network.
Which is every adolescent, essentially. So, I mean, there's so many issues here, and yet, our institutional care is so poor. I mean, institutions are usually very badly maintained. If they're good, they're very, very expensive for all kinds of mental illnesses, including addictions. Why don't we have more care institutions?
Okay, so one of the responses...
Because not every family can take care of, the person who's mentally unwell. Yeah. So you need a place where you hope your child, your husband, whatever, will go and recover and then come back sober or whatever.
Your yesterday's session was initially by the chairperson of the National Human Rights
Yes,
Commission.
Commission.
And in fact, the NHRC initiated a lot of studies into looking at the human rights angles of mental illness.
Right.
Initially, of course, maybe about a century ago, 50 years ago, a lot of the care for severe mental illness occurred in mental hospitals.
Yes.
But there was also a lot of human rights abuses that were happening
Absolutely.
there. So the whole
Some
idea,
horrific stories.
correct. So the whole idea is to really convert them into more state-of-art, rights-based institutions, which are much more open-door institutions where people can go get help, but
And
at the same time come back.
back.
It's also very important to decentralize this
Yeah.
and provide healthcare closer to the people. So now the whole idea is really to have many more services available closer to people, and then have hospitalization in a very limited manner. But in India, even the beds for people who need hospitalization for severe mental illness is very, very low. And that's something that we need to recognize.
To add very quickly, MAM and AIMS, I would be two different ends of the spectrum. One is that NIMHANS is the cutting edge and the government's arm about research in mental health and everything. The other way that happened with NHRC is to decrease the stigma. So what people have said that, look, you do not need to put people in mental hospitals because it is highly stigmatizing. Even if you go to a mental hospital, that process is stigmatizing. So General Hospital Psychiatric Unit, GHPUs, came into being, where psychiatry is just like medicine or cardiology or anything. So this ward versus that ward. So currently, a huge chunk of the government effort is also going to strengthening these GHPUs, so that, like, you get admitted. So that's for the major of the common mental disorders or severe mental disorders it can. But I do agree that there are people who do not have the family resources and who require slightly longer amount of stay. That part, because of lot of issues which will not go into, it's like there was, so at some point of time the government closed down all the mental asylums which were there for human rights.
But now a lot of private
Medical colleges,
private
many medical colleges have
caregivers
departments of
come.
Yes.
psychiatry,
Yeah.
general hospitals have, private psychiatrists are
Yeah.
available. So I think there is this range of services that are available, not enough,
And,
enough.
and not inexpensive enough.
not expensive.
Can we talk quickly and lastly about mental health insurance? Why is it not treated at par with any other illness?
Okay, in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
there has been an attempt to include mental illnesses. In fact, we've had a committee which I actually chaired to look at the insurance for mental illnesses. While they're included, there are a lot of exclusion criteria.
Exactly.
That kind
Very
of really,
complicated.
That make it so complicated. The other thing is it's available only for inpatient care. It's not available for outpatient care. It's available only for a limited set of conditions, so that needs to be expanded. Medications as well as psychological interventions need to be included in that. So we've made a whole set of recommendations, but we obviously need to continue to work at it to make sure that it becomes insurable.
Have these been accepted?
They have been accepted, but they need to be rolled out, and then we need to see what is the impact of that rolling out.
Right. Any last word?
One is that if you are in mental health in India, you need to be infectiously optimistic, right?
That is in any profession in
So-
India. If you're an Indian, you need to be optimistic.
But if you can do that, I still see the beauty in our country where, insurance that you are saying, our doctors are not forced by insurance companies in US, where they have to send a patient out. Our families still provide support, although they may be too nosy in other situations. Our family care is amazing.
Yeah.
Our societies are still much more coherent. People there are other people who are helping. So, yes, we do not have the resources as much as they are in the West, but we have our own unique ways. If you are infectiously happy, you have to get by, yes. And Jugaad is a very good thing. So if you can do that, why not? So, ma'am, it's your experience. Why can't we do Jugaad?
My last words, as you said, is mental health is very, very important. Please don't ignore your mental health. You can very, very consciously make sure, just like you look after your physical health, look after your mental health. Any of us can have psychological distress, mental distress, or develop a disorder. So, be open to the fact that you can get help. it's much better to get help early rather than wait. And make sure that you don't stigmatize anybody who has a mental health problem.
Or yourself.
Or yourself.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you're your biggest
Help
enemy.
help yourself, and get help if you need to get help.
Thank you so much. I think it was very instructive.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
If I may call upon Ms. Santwana Bhattacharya
Thank you
to
so much.
felicitate and thank our speakers on stage. This session, ladies and